Kicking off this list in 10th place, we have the American Bonano crime family. As one of the 5 families that dominate organized crime in the New York region, their history is longer than I am, so I promise I'll do my very best to keep this concise. Bonano family was seen as the most brutal of the 5 families during the 20th century, so they're definitely a group to steer clear of. The origins of this crime family can be traced back to the town of Castellammare del Golfo, located in the province of Trapani, Sicily. Their boss, Giuseppe Pepe Bonano, and his older brother and advisor, Stefano. I'm not Italian, but I'm trying my best. The clan's strongest ally was the leader of the Magaddino clan, Stefano Magaddino, the brother of Joseph's maternal grandmother. During the 1900s, the two clans feuded with Felice Buccellato, the boss of the Buccellato clan. In 1902, Stefano arrived in New York and became a powerful member of the Castellammarese clan. After the deaths of Stefano and Giuseppe, their younger brother, Salvatore, took revenge by killing members of the Buccellatos. In 1903, Salvatore married Catherine Bonventre, and on January 18th of 1905, she gave birth to Joseph Bonano, the future kingpin of this family. Now, 3 years later, Salvatore moved his family to New York City and began establishing dominance and control in the Castellammarese community of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Now, while operating in Brooklyn, the leaders were able to secure the criminal organization's future. As of 2017, the family has 110 established members and over 500 associates. They've been responsible for numerous assassinations and accidental deaths over the years, to the point where I spent half an hour today trying to count them and I kept getting lost, and that was with a Red Bull in my system. I'll highlight one thing though: leadership in this mob family mostly changes through the death of a previous leader, and I counted around 20 or so bosses over the years. Power ain't always a great thing. In 9th place, we have the House of Borgia. Believed to be the first ever criminal family, they were an Italian Aragonese Spanish noble family who rose to prominence during the Italian Renaissance. During the reign of Pope Alexander VI, formerly known as Rodrigo Borgia, they were suspected of many crimes, including, but not limited to, adultery, incest, simony, theft, bribery, and killings, mostly from the liberal use of arsenic. Now, because of their grasping for power, they meet enemies of the Medici, the Sforza, and the Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola, amongst others. I promise I'm trying here. The Borgia family stands out in history as being infamously steeped in sin and immorality, and I can see why. Now, going back to that mention of Alexander VI's reign, it is reported that the Borgia hosted orgies in the Vatican Palace. Banquet of Chestnuts being considered one of the most disreputable balls of this kind, with reports of 50 courtesans in attendance for the entertainment of the banquet guests. It is alleged that not only was the Pope present, but also 2 of his children, Lucrezia and Cesare, were. An orgy in the Vatican? I'm just gonna back up here. I'm begging for anyone with a time machine to loan me one so I can view that, because that boggled my mind. I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church. This is just bonkers. Also, yeah, this Pope had kids, something I had to read 5 times to understand. While he was a cardinal, Pope Alexander maintained a long-term illicit relationship with Venosa de Catani, with whom he had 4 children: Giovanni, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Giuffre. Now, Rodrigo also had children by other women, including one daughter with his mistress, Giulia Farnese. Now, speaking of those offspring, Cesare went on to kill Giovanni in hopes of gaining more power within the family, and was successful on that front. Lucrezia was a notorious poisoner, and she became famous for her skill at political intrigue, also the mysterious deaths and disappearances of her husbands. Okay, look, I've got a soft spot for Black Widow killers, okay? In 8th place, we have the Mongol family. Now, while he was 4 years old in 1969, Bobby Bongo woke up on Christmas morning to a heavy metal wrench in a plain brown paper bag under the tree. Later that day, he and his brothers used the wrench to break into a local grocery store and steal pop, making his father, a career criminal who went by the name Rooster, proud. Now, the Mongol family crime spree spanned over 4 generations and crossed multiple states, from Texas to Oregon, beginning in the early 1920s with ancestors who were moonshiners and carnival workers, and involved hundreds of felonies covering just about every genre of lawlessness, from death and sodomy to burglary and insurance fraud. They stole everything, from chickens and cows to lumber and metal, and once broke into a government-run fish hatchery just to gorge themselves on salmon. When the children were barely in middle school, they were already stealing really big trucks. Now, unlike other vicious families on this list, being part of a close, loving, and supportive family is what made them what they are. Granted, nobody in this family was especially bright. They killed people and then would make calls to their mom from the victim's home phone. They once melted a stolen safe with a torch and then tried to spend the burnt money. I feel like y'all get the gist of it. But yeah, that's a heck of a family legacy.
And speaking of dysfunction, it's the crappy Castiles. Born fourth in line to the throne of her parents, Ferdinand and Isabella, Juana was married off to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy at age 16. When a series of sibling deaths made her the heir apparent to Isabella's throne, her husband confined her, using her mother's death in an attempt to press his claim over Ferdinand's for the Castilian throne. Juana already experienced mental illness before this point, and the loss of her mother had been an aggravating factor. Being imprisoned? Yeah, that does not help. After Philip's death in 1506, already known to fly into jealous rages over her husband's mistresses, even reportedly going so far as to attack at least one. Honestly, same energy here, girl. Juana refused to part with her deceased husband's remains for a disturbingly long time and was said to have opened her husband's casket to embrace and kiss him. Juana's confinement continued for another decade after her father's regency until he died. Unfortunately, Juana's husband Philip had spread rumors about her madness when he was still alive, and her behavior after his death didn't help, so her son Charles, who became the Holy Roman Emperor, eventually took over for Juana as regent and then monarch. From then on, it was him who kept her imprisoned and created a fictional world to keep her isolated. No one actually knows if she was crazy or just experienced depression and lived in an era where men undermined her intelligence and constantly threw distressing BS her way. Next up is two sets of dirty duos. The extreme punishment of a perceived disgraced royal woman stretches back at bare minimum to, dawn of time. Yeah, we haven't had a lick of peace since men started making rules, to say the least. In 1314, the high-spirited Marguerite and Blanche of Burgundy, daughters-in-law to King Philip of France, were accused of having scandalous liaisons with two brothers, Philippe and Gaultier d'Aulnay. According to historian Alison Weir, the notorious Queen Isabella of England was the gossip girl who outed her pretty careless sister-in-laws out of wedlock romps, which took place primarily in the Parisian tower called Tour de Nesle. Blanche and Marguerite both admitted to their adultery because it was that or death, so I mean, their erasure from public life was swift. They had their heads shaved and they were tossed in the rich white girl dungeon, which isn't that bad. Meanwhile, this is the one time in Western history where the men actually faced a pretty harsh adultery consequence, something usually found in every other area of the world. The brothers had their elephant trunks and boys chopped off while they were awake and alive, and then their nether regions were thrown to dogs, which they had to watch the dogs eat before being brutally executed. Marguerite, technically Queen of France upon her husband's ascension to throne, died in 1315, and Blanche languished in captivity, whereabouts barely known, and died in 1326. Modern day monarchy wouldn't be complete without a tax fraud family. 2014, the dubbed philandering playboy king Juan Carlos of Spain found his popularity plummeting. His initial ascension to throne in 1975 had been wondrous, but now following reports of his messy affair and exuberantly lavish lifestyle in the midst of Spain's economic collapse, he abdicated the throne in favor of his son Philippe. His daughter Infanta Cristina stirs the pot, charged with tax fraud in 2014. Although she was acquitted in 2017, she was stripped of her title and left Spain for Switzerland. But it was her husband's turn, I guess, because the former handball champion was convicted on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion and sent to prison in 2018. Since then, Spanish prosecutors launched 3 separate investigations into the former king over allegations including corruption, money laundering, credit card fraud, and kickbacks, though all were dismissed earlier this year due to insufficient evidence, the statute of limitations, and of course the monarch's constitutional immunity. In a recent case, Seguin Wistin has sued him for using Spain's spy agency to threaten her, and in 2020 he was stripped of a Spanish stipend and went into self-exiled in the UAE. First, the great-grandmother, an imprisoned princess. Starting in 1682, Princess Sophia Dorothea of Saly married the basic B-word George of Hanover. She didn't like him, his stupid court, or the mistress that dominated his life, so in 91 she starts her own affair with Philip Christoph von, hard last name, it sounds super Scandinavian. They're naturally very stupid and their love letters get intercepted by Clara, Countess von Platen, who was Sophia's literal mistress-in-law, and Clara tells the whole royal family, who act like a mob and hire 4 dudes to kill Philip right outside of Sophia's apartment, in her line of sight. Then they took Sophia's kids away and told them to forget her existence. They imprison her at Alden House in Germany, and to save face, Sophia Dorothea is titled a duchess, allowing her to administrate over a small village, receiving dignitaries and other religious figures in her gilded cage, although she was only allowed to walk or ride on short bits of the road. It's said that the notorious hateful relationship between George I and his son George II was the cause of the disrespect towards his mother Sophia. She had died at Alden House in 1726, largely forgotten, and her legend would only resurface a few decades later due to a scandal that swirled around her great-granddaughter, Cataline Matilda of Great Britain, the sister of King George George III. Now, the great-granddaughter, Queen of Tears. In 1766, at the age of 15, the daring and eccentric Cataline Matilda is married to cousin King Christian of Denmark, who suffered from being a massive insipid turd who grew up with untamed anger management and insecurities that made him into a deranged bully as an adult. Christian treated Caroline exactly how you would imagine from that description. He even delayed consummating their union for years, which is wildly unheard of. She traveled alone, no maids or family or rich folk stuff, to Denmark from England, and no one even told her he was a nutcase who would hate her. Yeah, no, by 1770, she was having her own affair with Johan Friedland Struensee, and the two lovers soon scandalized Europe by essentially taking over Denmark, issuing reforms and infuriating the nobility. Cataline Matilda was riding high, striding through the court in men's clothing, subverting the patriarchal codes of the day. In 772, Denmark's Queen Juliana Maria orchestrated a palace coup, and the increasingly tyrannical Johan is executed in April. Cataline Matilda is banished and disgraced. Her unacceptable conduct convinces her brother George that he could not welcome back this criminal sister into the English royal family. Ripped away from her children, she is sent to Celle Castle in Hanover, and like her great-grandmother, put under a sort of Gentile house arrest. Unlike her great-grandmother, she is allowed to walk through town, earning praise from commoners for her kindness and charity. Because it doesn't count as a crime if he did it to himself. Most of the information we have about Crown Prince Sado, born in 1735, comes from the wife's autobiography, Queen Hayajian, written in 1805. She recalled what happened as his disease progressed. Prince Sado's mental health further deteriorated by 1757, following the death of the Queen and his adopted grandmother. To release his emotions and frustrations, Sado began to beat the court eunuchs and staff. When that wasn't enough, he began to kill. Here's what his wife's account was of that. The first person he killed was Kim Hachia, the eunuch who happened to be on duty that day. The prince came in with the severed head and displayed it to the ladies in waiting. The bloody head, the first I ever saw, was simply a horrifying sight. As if he had to kill to release his rage, the prince harmed many ladies in waiting. I suffered so for this. His illness seeped deeper and deeper. Now that he was killing people, our quarters became a house of horrors, in which no one could be certain that they would not fall victim next. Eventually, Prince Sado kills his favorite mistress and threatens his own sister. In 1762, realizing the disgusting conduct would ruin the Korean family, his mother appealed to his father and they had to eliminate their own child. Since tradition dictated that his wife, Lady Hyajong, would have to die as well as their son if they punished Prince Sado, the king came up with a bizarre solution to safeguard the daughter-in-law and heir. On a sweltering day in July, the king forced Sado to step into a rice chest that would then be locked. So that way, technically, the disgraced prince had caused his own death. He died 8 days later. And I can't even give you a funny title for this one because it's just a lot. This is the crop top king. King Maha of Thailand, crowned in 2019, is a philandering train wreck hot mess. When his third wife dumped him, he tossed her parents in prison for 2.5 years for royal defamation. His earlier 2 marriages were equally rocky. He allegedly fathered 5 children with a mistress during his first marriage to his cousin, and then married said mistress. Later he dumped her and made her flee the country. When he was crowned prince, taking a page from Caligula, he appointed his pet poodle Fufu to the royal air chief marshal, then held 4 days of Buddhist funeral rites when the poodle died in 2015. He even took the pooch to a 2007 reception hosted by His Honor the US Ambassador Ralph Skip Boyce. Then there is the 70-year-old king's fondness for wearing crop tops and temporary tats. Check out this sick pic at an airport in Munich, strutting his stuff with a rolled up tank top, sagging jeans, and fake tattoos with the poodle in tow. Call this king a queen cause he is serving! Belly-bearing vests have become the garment of choice for many young Thai pro-democracy protesters in rallies in recent years. They are looking to limit the powers of the king who has become the richest monarch in the world, partly by amassing personal control of an estimated $43 billion in royal assets in 2018 that were historically overseen by an agency meant to manage the money for the benefit of the Thai people. His response for this was to ban crop tops. In July 2019, 2 months after the king married his fourth wife, his longtime mistress Siniat was made a royal consort in hopes of getting her to shut up and accept that he'd never marry her and make her queen. 2 months later, because this didn't work, he strips her of her titles, tosses her in jail until she can learn to behave, and after 10 months, she's released back to his custody for about 2,000 explicit images of them to get leaked to the entirety of the Thai community in a cyber attack, and everyone sees these guys. They're explicit. Obviously, I could keep talking about this guy and his gross scandals forever. There's no shortage of them, but instead, we'll stare at these airport photos again because man, what the hell am I seeing here?
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Morgan family. The Morgan Dynasty refers to a wealthy and influential American family that made its fortune in the banking industry. The family's patriarch, Junius Spencer Morgan, was born in 1813 and began his career as a banker in Boston. He later moved to London, where he worked for the banking firm George Peabody & Co. and established his own firm, J.S. Morgan & Co. Junius Spencer Morgan's son, John Pierpont Morgan, also known as J.P. Morgan, became one of the most powerful financiers of all time. It is said that during the bank crisis in 1893, J.P. Morgan borrowed 100 tons of gold to the U.S. authorities, which is how he and his family would later go on to control the gold in the USA. He expanded the family's banking empire and played a major role in financing many of the largest industrial and infrastructure projects of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including the creation of U.S. Steel, General Electric, and International Harvester. There are some pretty dark beliefs that some have about this family that ties to their involvement in both world wars, as well as the fact that members of the family played significant roles in the founding of the Federal Reserve System and the International Monetary Fund. The family's wealth and influence has allowed them to maintain close ties to the political and the social elite. Today, the Morgans still own the biggest family reserve of gold, and rumor has it that it is connected by a tunnel with the New York branch of the U.S. Central Bank. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Dupont family. The Dupont family is a prominent family of French descent that has played a very significant role in the development of the United States since the late 18th century. The family has been involved in a variety of industries, including chemicals, gunpowder, textiles, and agriculture. The Dupont family's story began with, the first Dupont, who was a French chemist who immigrated to the United States in 1800. He would later go on to found a chemical company that specialized in the production of gunpowder. The company's success helped to establish the Dupont family as one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the United States. These roots only grew deeper as the family allegedly ensured the U.S. purchase of Louisiana from Napoleon in 1803. During World War II, the family's chemical company played a very significant role in the Manhattan Project, which developed the very first atomic bomb. The family has also been involved in politics, with several members serving as governors, senators, and other elected officials. Some even believe that this family had the ability to influence U.S. authorities so much that they might be responsible for the initial ban of the production of hemp and the ban on the devil's lettuce in order to protect the production of nylon, which was one of the most important products for the DuPont company. Today, the company is one of the biggest producers of GMO seeds, and they also have founded the Doomsday Treasury, where samples of all plants are held and preserved in the case of an apocalypse. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Rothschild family. The Rothschild dynasty is a very wealthy and influential family that gained prominence in the late 18th and early 19th centuries through their banking and financial activities. The family originated in Frankfurt, Germany, and its founder, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, began his banking career in the 1760s. Apparently, he sent 5 of his sons to financial centers so that the family could be involved in all of the most important places for world finances. The Rothschilds quickly became one of the most powerful banking families in Europe, with branches in major cities such as Paris, Vienna, and London. They financed governments, monarchs, and other wealthy individuals and played a very significant role in the economic and political affairs of many European countries. One of the most notable achievements of the family was their role in financing the British war effort against Napoleon Bonaparte in the early 19th century. The family used their vast network of agents and couriers to get information about the outcome of battles before anyone else, which allowed them to make informed decisions about investments. The Rothschilds also played a key role in the development of the modern banking system, including the establishment of the Bank of
England, and the introduction of the concept of a central bank. Today, the family remains one of the wealthiest and most influential in the world, with a net worth estimated at several billions of dollars, with some estimating that they manage trillions of dollars worth of money. Some even claim that the Rothschild family controls the world through the US Central Bank Federal Reserve.
Number 7. King Rudolph II. The Holy Roman Emperor from 1552. He was known as a collector of sorts. These royals, they like to collect things, they like to spend their money on weird things. Some princes collect stamps, others collect zoo animals. See, his castle was home to lions, tigers, and orangutans, so good luck getting a full 8 hours of sleep, my friends. He also collected human artifacts, this royal, so that's a bit odd to collect when you're a royal. Imagine having company over, you're like, yeah, watch the lion crap, and also don't mind the jars of eyes. Do you want a drink? Let me get you a drink. King Rudolph II, okay, he's quite important in history, obviously. He supported the scientific revolution a lot, and he also poured tons of money into astrology, so he was into cool stuff. Number 6, Prince Harry costume party. YouTube doesn't like when I say some words, specifically a word that rhymes with Yahtzee. But with this being one of the biggest scandals, I have to bring it up, I have to mention it. The Duke was also referred to as a bad boy, but just how deep did these incidents cut? Was he like topless on a beach and he's bad, or was he dressed up as something horrible at a Halloween party? It was the latter. Before he settled down with Meghan in 2018, Harry had to issue a public apology in 2005 because, whoops, somebody got photos from that party. Did the royal dress up as the Beast from Beauty and the Beast? No. Did he dress up like a witch? No, it would have been fun, but no. Photos leaked of him wearing a World War II German soldier outfit. Can't say much here, but it was even equipped with a specific armband. Yeah, we can't show you either, but you get what I'm saying. This was a not great time. It was poor taste. He could have dressed up in any way. He's a royal, and he does this instead. I don't know, it's very off-putting. Harry said afterwards, quote, "I am very sorry if I caused any offense or embarrassment to anyone," end quote. Wow, he really meant that one. Really came from the heart, that apology. It was a poor choice of costume, and I apologize, he says. Okay, number 5, King Henry II. This is a quote that people believe was Nostradamus predicting the death of King Henry II, who actually was a personal acquaintance of the prophet himself. That'd be scary. Hey, how do I tell you this? While at one point Nostradamus was seen addressing King Henry II as the most invincible Henry, King of France, unfortunately Henry proved to be quite vincible when he met his gruesome death at the age of 40. In the summer of 1559, a terrible jousting accident went awry and it left the king passing away shortly after from sepsis. This is a terrible story, but I told you it because many think that Nostradamus predicted this. The jousting incident saw the king having splinters driven into his eye and his skull by one of his young soldiers, and the Nostradamus quote reads, "The young lion will overcome the older one." Yeah, he's jousting and then the eye, and then it happened. That sucks. Number 4, Prince Charles the Vampire. Now, some of these theories, yeah, they're a bit out there. I didn't make them up. I wish I did, but I didn't. Some believers out there actually think Prince Charles is a vampire, a blood-sucking, flying, turning into a bat-looking vampire. I don't know. Why? Because Prince Charles is related to Vlad the Impaler. You know, that 15th century ruler who inspired the story of Dracula in Transylvania, who we're all pretty sure was a vampire. Now, it's a fun theory that went about, but Prince Charles having a piece of Romania is definitely helping out this case. We kind of believe this. The prince has been conserving forests and he even got property over there, so maybe he's a vampire, maybe not. Maybe he just likes property and castles. And Vlad the Impaler. I heard he's a great lad. A great Vlad. Number 3, Shapeshifters. Awesome. I'm not actually Taylor, I'm someone else pretending to be. That's cool. That's why I'm so energetic today. This next theory I wish I could claim for my own again, but it was actually former BBC presenter David Icke. He takes the cake himself. Here we go. He has since revealed himself as a conspiracy theorist, and one that surrounds the royal family had me stunned. Icke and quite a few others claim that the royal family is part of the Illuminati. Yeah, and then all of them earn their power because their human ancestor mated with reptilian aliens. They were clapping alien reptilians. That's how they became royals. That's the trick. You gotta clap some reptilian alien. David says the theory actually explains why royal families are obsessed with keeping their bloodlines clean with other royals. And you know, incest. But the biggest what the part of all this has to be when David told the public that he knows people who have seen royal family members change into reptiles and then back into human form again. Number 2, leaked letters. We'll end with some recent leaked letters. We love those. We love some gossip. We mentioned Princess Diana. Well, we've got more stuff. We've got more tea. In May 2018, the royal wedding, it was thought at the time that Meghan's father was absent because of a heart attack that he suffered days before. But a year or so later, it's revealed that Thomas Markle and the new Duchess weren't as close. There was some drama. There was some beef going on in the family. Thomas spoke out against his own daughter. There was a scandal where Meghan spoke to Oprah, the tell-all that we all watched, and Meghan actually said to her father that if you tell me the truth about what happened, about working with paparazzi, then we can help and get through it. But he wasn't able to do that, and that for me has really resonated. Yeah, if my dad was working with paparazzi, showing them private letters as well, just for clout, I'd be upset too. As if my dad can't even open his iPad without me, let alone leak my letters. Number 1, personal sheet changer. I can't tell if this is the worst thing ever or the best, but it's kept me laughing for months now. Royals have been sweating constantly about other people trying to, take them out, right? It's a scary job. Everyone wants to attack you. I mentioned Boyd Jones on here a few times, that guy that stalked the Queen. It's terrifying. People are terrifying. Boyd Jones would go through the Queen's drawers and, big ooh. So historically, the royal family would try their best to anticipate any and all attacks. Be as safe as you can be, right? Of course. Like the kissing sheets, for example. Oh, have you heard about these kissing sheets, this royal position? A great deal of monarchs hired taste testers to make sure nobody poisoned them, that's normal. But they also had a guy who would get tucked in the king's sheets. I would much rather have the latter, know what I mean? King Henry VIII hired somebody to make sure the bed wasn't poisoned. So you were required to make the king's bed every morning, but you also had to rub all the sheets down everywhere before bedtime. You'd have to kiss the bed sheets to make sure they weren't poisoned. Yeah, sleep tight. All safe here, boss. Here we go. Don't mind the old medieval dad breath all over your pillows. You're safe for the night. That's so gross. I can't even sleep in a hotel sometimes, let alone some dude. Mwah, 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 mwah. Mwah, mwah. I'm like, what are you doing? Get this guy out of here. Why is he kissing my bed? Clothes as well. That was also touched. Maybe not kissed, but it was for sure touched. Guys wearing my clothes in my bed, kissing my sheets? No way. I think I'd rather get poisoned. Take my jeans off. Get out of there. Kicking off our list at number 10, Princess Diana. We'll start with a tragedy right off the gate. Here we go. Prince Charles, the oldest son of the Queen, he straight up admitted to having an affair with Camilla right before his divorce from his first wife, Princess Diana. So in turn, Princess Diana addressed that relationship and what exactly happened. During that famous 1995 interview with BBC, she couldn't have said it better if I'm being honest myself. Diana said, very confidently, well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. That's a Princess Diana roast, folks. Oh no! Yeah, Princess Diana, she's full of roasts apparently. Diana also said she was in love with riding instructor Major James Hewitt during her marriage to Charles, so everybody was a little busy, it seemed, and rightfully so. Diana's like, yeah, I'm not hanging out with this guy. Diana and Charles divorced in 1996, only a year before her tragic accident took her life. Later in 2005, he married Camilla. Yeah, has anybody seen Spencer? Kristen Stewart looks great in that movie, and I want to know if it's worth the watch. Comment down below. Number 9, The Great Fire. One of the most wild Nostradamus predictions of all time. It reads, the blood of the just will commit a fault at London, burnt through lightning of 23's the 6th. The ancient lady will fall from her high place, several of the same sect will be killed. Now, there are of course many people who believe that this entry here was actually one that predicted the Great Fire of London that occurred in 1666. The line 23's the 6th and times 20 by 3, and then you add 6, you get 66. Right? Quick math. But most importantly, it may also mention London and the royal family. And in real life, this fire did affect them as well. Also, it is said by many that the reference to the lady here is another term for the kingdom, the lady. This means that Nostradamus was predicting, maybe, that the kingdom was going to fall as a result of the Great Fire. So, yeah, he kind of nailed it. I don't know. Number 8, King James. Not to be confused with LeBron James, although he's a pretty good king as well. He's all right, that fellow. This is a different king. In an official 16th century medical book, the actual medical advice at one point was to not bathe. Don't do it or else you're a sinner, I guess. Use not baths or stews, nor sweat too much, for all openeth of the pores of a man's body, and maketh the venomous air to enter, and for to infect the blood. First of all, what? What did you just say? Why is every shred of medical knowledge from the past always written in riddles like it's a Harry Potter spell? You know what I mean? God forbid you have bronchitis in the 16th century. A doctor is like, yes, just a flower petal will fix that. The doctor with one of these comes in? No way, not listening to that guy. They thought that taking a bath would make you sick, so King James IV, apparently he never took a bath. And his hygiene was so bad that he would sometimes pass on lice to others just by walking by them. He would walk by and they'd be like, guy's got Steven Tyler's hair. What is that? Like, can we cut it if it's infected with gross? Can we just, maybe a bald king? How does a bald king sound?
In 7th place, we have the beginning of the Mongol Empire. Now, Genghis Khan rose from obscurity in a small corner of the Mongolian steppe to form the largest land empire in history. For the Mongols, the family was the central pillar of society. Now, Genghis's sons and then grandsons extended the empire to reach from the western shores of the Black Sea to the Pacific. The Mongols, often outnumbered, conquered through their mastery of tactics and psychological warfare. If a city or an entire people surrendered, they would treat them well and allow them to enjoy the fruits of a secure world. If the people resisted the Mongol advance, they and their cities would feel the full fury of the enraged invaders. Despite all the violence that took place as they extended their rule, once the Mongols were in power, their lands were, I guess, safe and well controlled. In many cases, this apparently represented a distinct improvement from previous conditions. Subjects had considerable personal liberty, such as the freedom to follow their own religion, but at what cost? Some experts calculate that 11% of the world's population died because of the Mongol expansion. In 6th place, we have the Genovese crime family. Yep, another one of the New York 5 families. Also referred to as the West Side, they were founded by Charles Lucky Luciano in 1931 until being renamed after boss Vito Genovese in 1957. Originally in control of the waterfront on the west side of Manhattan, as well as the docks and the Fulton Fish Market on the East River waterfront, the family was run for years by Vincent the Chin Gigante, who feigned insanity by shuffling unshaven through New York's Greenwich Village wearing a tattered bathrobe and muttering to himself incoherently to avoid prosecution. Hey, if it works, it works. The Genovese family is the oldest and largest of the 5 families. Finding new ways to make money in the 21st century, the family took advantage of lax due diligence by banks during the housing bubble with a wave of mortgage frauds. They appear to be the most organized and powerful family in the US, with sources believing that Liborio Barney Bellomo is the current boss of the organization. Unique in today's mafia, the family has benefited greatly from members following omerta, a code of conduct emphasizing secrecy and non-cooperation with law enforcement in the justice system. While many mobsters from across the country have testified against their crime families since the 1980s, this family has had only 11 members and associates turn on them in its history. They're known for crimes of racketeering, killing, labor union infiltration, extortion, illegal gambling, loan sharking, bookmarking, truck hijacking, fraud, women of the night, bribery, and more. That's a long enough list, thanks. In 5th place, we have the Ptolemies of ancient Egypt. They ruled between 305 to 30 BC and are responsible for such a long list of mysterious deaths that I had no choice but to include them on today's list. While they ruled Egypt, they were actually of Greek descent and Greek speaking, but adopted the traditional practice of Egyptian rulers that married their siblings or close family members. They viewed family members as a fight to the death, where you constantly try to eliminate your closest relatives before they did it to you. Oh, and since the men in this dynasty were all literally named Ptolemy, but the whatever number, I'll just be referring to them by P and their number to avoid getting confused. Ready? P the Fourth killed his mother, who had previously killed her mother because he was having an affair with her mother. Don't worry, that statement originally confused me as well, but it's only going downhill from here. He then married his sister Arsinoe III, who was immediately killed after her husband/brother's death. Her son, P the Fifth, had his mother's killers ripped to pieces by a mob. P the Seventh was either killed by his uncle or his father, we're not quite sure which one's which. P the Eighth married Cleopatra II, but began an affair with her daughter, Cleopatra III. He had his son cut into pieces and then sent them to his mother, Cleopatra II. His daughter killed her sister, Cleopatra IV. P the Ninth tried to kill his mother, Cleopatra III, and then married first one, and then another sister, both called Cleopatra. I thought my life was rough because I sadly share a name with, a stupid Amazon gizmo, but at least I'm not surrounded by a million people with one of two names. P the 10th married the daughter of P the 9th, Berenice III. P the 11th also married Berenice III, who was either his sister or his mother or both. However, after 19 days of marriage, he had her killed and was promptly torn to pieces by an enraged Greek mob. I'll stick with my dysfunctional family. Thanks, I like not being killed or marrying my brother. In fourth place, we have the Gonzalez Sisters. Now, the four Gonzalez sisters ran a successful brothel business from 1945 until the police closed it down in 1964. The woman who worked for the sisters often did not do so voluntarily. The Gonzalez family had kidnapped some, while others had answered advertisements for housemaids. When the woman arrived at the brothel, the sisters would often force heroin on those who were reluctant to provide the services that the sisters demanded. Sadly, when the girls became unable or reluctant to work and satisfy their clients, the sisters killed them. If the client turned up with a lot of money, he too might end up dead with his cash stolen. When the police raided the property, they found the bodies of 80 women and 11 men. Now, there were probably many more victims that they just couldn't find. The Mexican court sentenced the sisters to 40 years in prison. Fun fact, Guinness World Records has named them the most prolific death partnership. In third place, we have the Scottish Bean Clan. While that might sound like some kind of yummy dish, this sadly isn't a recipe channel. They were a 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century that killed and feasted on over 1,000 people over 25 years. Now, according to legend, Bean and his clan members were eventually caught by a search party sent by King James VI and executed for their heinous crimes. Alexander Bean was born in East Lothian during the 16th century, where he eventually met a vicious woman named Black Agnes Douglas, who shared his inclinations and was accused of being a witch. After some robbing and the consumption of one of their victims, the couple ended up at a coastal cave in Banane Head between Girvan and Ballantrae. The cave was 200 yards deep, and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide, so the couple was able to live there undiscovered for some 25 years. Sonia and Agnes produced 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons. And yep, the grandchildren were products of keeping it in the family, if you catch my drift. This clan thrived by laying careful ambushes at night to rob and end individuals or small groups, bringing the bodies back to their cave where the corpses were dismembered for dinner. They pickled the leftovers in barrels and discarded what they didn't need, which would sometimes wash up on nearby beaches. This strategy was used to help conceal their crimes and lead villagers to believe animals who were attacking travelers. The body parts and disappearances did not go completely unnoticed by the local villagers, but the clan stayed in their cave by day and took their victims at night, so most villagers were unaware of their existence. The clan was eventually captured alive and executed without trial, as people saw them as, subhuman and unfit for one. Sonia and his fellow men had their genitalia cut off and thrown into fires, their hands and feet severed before being left to die. Agnes and the rest of the women were tied to stakes and burned alive, which makes sense for the time period. In second place, we have the Gang of Amazons. Anessa, along with her husband Roman Potkavev and daughters Victoria and Anastasia, officially began their death spree in 2008, until they were apprehended in 2013, but some outlying deaths date back to 1998. Now, beginning on February 17th of 2008, in Aksai, the family ended Mikhail Zlindev, head of Information Security Department of the State Control Service, and his wife in their home. While we know how they killed them, I can't describe the implements used other than saying one is traditionally used for chopping veggies and the other one makes a kaboom noise. Later that year, in July, in the same region but on the highway, the posse used that kaboom device again to derail a vehicle containing Rostovitz Alexei Sazonov and Julia Vasileva, ending the life of one and seriously wounding the other. The family stole a purse with a driver's license and a passport. On March 10th of 2009, in the outskirts of Novocherkassk, the family broke into a house and killed the 2 residents who lived there. They first kaboomed them, and before finishing them off with that cooking utensil I mentioned before. The family took passports, a laptop, a camera, women's boots, and a man's jacket. In July of that same year, the family overpowered and kaboomed Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Shudakov, his wife, and their son while they were parked on the shoulder of the road, while their daughter Veronica was impaled 37 times. They didn't strike again until 2010, when they gouged out the eyes of 2 young women before taking their lives. On September 19th of 2012 in Novocherkassk, the family killed 26-year-old Vladimir Mendrik and 22-year-old Vasily Kempforin, 2 employees of a private security company who responded to alarms going off at a local dental clinic. The family took the security guard's service weapons. Alright, that's enough from this family. They were eventually apprehended and viewed their crimes as nothing wrong, just another day at the office. I'll stick with my happy office, thanks. In first place, we have the Bender family. While they have a popular moniker as well, I can't mention the other word. Just know that it starts with B and refers to human fluid. They were a family of serial killers who lived and operated in Lebec County, Kansas, from May of 1871 to December of 1872. The family consisted of John Bender, his wife Elvira, and their son John Jr. and daughter Kate. While there's no definitive number, estimates report that the Benders killed at least a dozen travelers before their crimes were discovered. Unsuspecting visitors to the family's bed and breakfast would be hypnotized by Kate to stay for dinner, and would be given a seat of honor at the table that was positioned over a trap door door into the cellar. With the victims back to the curtain, Kate would distract the guest, while John or his son came from behind the curtain and struck the guest on the right side of the skull with a hammer. One of the women would cut the victim's throat to ensure death, and the body was then dropped through the trap door. Once in the cellar, the body would be stripped and later buried somewhere on the property, often in the orchard. Although some of the victims were wealthy, others carried little of value on them, and the Benders had simply killed for the thrill. I can recommend much better hobbies if anyone out there is in need of a thrill. More than a dozen bullet holes were found in the roof and sides of the cabin. Now, the media speculated that some of the victims attempted to fight back, but we don't know. The fate of the family remains unknown to this day. They managed to avoid being captured, and while tales of possible spottings or captures of members are many, none were ever confirmed.
The secret love child. Writer Mariel Daniels, then a 16-year-old working on a biography of the Belgian Queen Paola in 1999, casually discovered, the then reigning King Albert II fathered an illegitimate daughter during an affair that lasted 18 years. Casual stuff, you know. She was born Delphine Bowles in 1968, daughter of Baroness Sybil Delcilius Longchamps, and from an early age, Delphine did know who her biological father was. Albert, who she nicknamed Papillon, was a constant presence in her childhood, even taking her on holiday. Though apparently an open secret in royal circles and the reason for marital troubles between the king and the queen, the story only became publicly known in 1999. Delphine had been speaking with Albert her whole life up to this point, who then reassured her that it would just blow over. But then in 2001 his tone changed. He told Delphine he wasn't her father and broke off their contact, leaving her in a state of shock. She eventually launched a legal action to secure recognition in 2012, but it dragged on for years as Albert continued to deny paternity. But when he stepped down from the Belgian throne in 2013, he lost legal immunity, so off the court they went. And it was only in 2020, after court-mandated DNA tests proved irrefutably that the former monarch was the father of artist Delphine Bowles, Albert was finally forced to acknowledge he'd fathered a child out of wedlock 51 years prior. And when it comes to siblings, you know what a big deal it is to say, "I call dibs"? William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England, had 4 sons. One died before him, but William split his kingdom between his remaining. Robert, who was given Normandy, and William, who was given the whole dang throne of England. That left the youngest Henry just cold hard cash. William consoled Henry with the prediction that he would one day amount to much more than either of his siblings, who proceeded to make his life hell, stealing from him and locking him away routinely. Then in 1100, William, the older brother, dies in a hunting accident. Henry didn't even bring the body back. I'm not kidding, he got on his horse and he went around and galloped to secure the royal treasury in Winchester before rushing to London, where he was crowned on the 5th of August 1100. He was king before Robert, returning in triumph from the First Crusade, even knew the crown should have been his. Robert attempted to take England for himself, but Henry beat him back, and then after a few years took Normandy too. Robert was captured and Henry kept him in prison for the rest of his life. Henry ruled for 35 years in total and lost his only heir to the sinking of the White Ship, causing a royal succession civil war called the Anarchy.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Windsor family. The Windsor family is of course the current reigning royal family of the United Kingdom. The dynasty was established in 1970 when King George V changed the family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which itself was a branch of the House of Wettin, was a prominent German dynasty. Queen Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and their descendants went on to become the rulers of several European countries. Many of us are of course privy to the many royal scandals there have been over the years for the Windsors, whether that has to do with the current king and his late wife, the very unsettling Prince Andrew, or some of the ongoing situations with Harry and Meghan. The former monarch, Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II, ascended the throne in 1952 following the death of her father, King George VI. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and oversaw very significant changes to the role and responsibilities of the British monarchy during her reign. Of course, as a monarch, this family retains quite a bit of power, a whole pile of wealth, and they are still heavily influential. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Walton family. The Walton family is one of the wealthiest families in the world and is best known for founding and owning the retail giant Walmart. This family is headed by siblings Jim, Alice, and Rob Walton, who inherited their fortune from their father, Sam Walton, who initially founded Walmart in 1962. Sam Walton began his career in retail with a single store in Arkansas, and over the years, he and his family grew Walmart into the largest retailer in the entire world, with thousands of stores in the United States and all around the world. Today, Walmart is a Fortune 500 company and one of the largest employers in the world, with over 2 million employees. The Walton family family's net worth is estimated to be around $230 billion, making them one of the wealthiest families in the world. In addition to their stake in Walmart, the family also has investments in other businesses and ventures, and throughout the years it's been, the company receives both praise for their practices, but more often than not are met with criticism for much of the questionable and shady dealings. In our number 6 spot today we have the Rockefeller family. The Rockefeller family is a very prominent American family that has played a very significant role in business, politics, philanthropy, and society for over a century. The family's wealth really started out with John D. Rockefeller, who founded the Standard Oil Company in the late 19th century and became one of the richest men in history. John actually had a major impact on the American economy, transforming the oil industry and creating a very vast empire that completely dominated the market. His business practices, including aggressive competition and horizontal integration, drew both admiration as well as criticism. The Rockefellers also had a hand in helping the construction of the United Nations, and they also founded Bilderberg, which is where the most powerful people in the world meet up. Other notable members of the Rockefeller family include Nelson Rockefeller, who served as governor of New York and vice president of the United States, and David Rockefeller, who was a very prominent banker and philanthropist. The family continues to be involved in various industries and philanthropic activities, with some estimates suggesting that their combined wealth is in the billions of dollars. Some out there also believe that the Rockefeller family now controls things, but in secret, through oil companies like ExxonMobil and BP, as well as through banks like Chase Manhattan Bank. In our number 4 spot today we have the House of Saud. The House of Saud is the ruling royal family of Saudi Arabia, and they have been in power since the country was founded in 1932. Over the years, the House of Saud has maintained its grip on power through a combination of political alliances, military force, and religious legitimacy. The family has also been able to leverage its vast oil wealth to consolidate its power both domestically and internationally. When the vast oil resources hidden in Saudi Arabia were found, it not only completely changed the economy of the nation, but it also catapulted the House of Saud into the world of richest families ever. The current king of Saudi Arabia is King Salman, who ascended to the throne in 2015 following the death of his half-brother King Abdullah. The current king's son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is widely regarded as the de facto ruler of the country. Of course, because of their mass amount of wealth and their current political position, it is no wonder this royal family remains on the list of powerful families in the world. In our number 3 spot today we have the Bush family. The Bush family is a very prominent American political family that has produced 2 US presidents, several other notable politicians, and successful business people. The story of the Bush dynasty really starts off with Prescott Sheldon Bush, who was a successful businessman and US senator from Connecticut. Allegedly, he became a member of a group called Skull and Bones and apparently was behind the failed military coup in 1933, which was aimed at taking power away from Franklin Roosevelt. During the Second World War, he was also the head of the Union Banking Corporation. This is all fine and well until the bank was impounded due to their connections with, well, you know who, the evil head of the Second World War. The Bush legacy continued on with his son, George H.W. Bush, who served as vice president under Ronald Reagan and was later elected president in 1988. George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush, served as governor of Texas and was also elected president, serving from 2001 to 2009. For people around my age, this is probably the most well-known member of the Bush family, and that is due to the multiple scandals surrounding his presidency, which would include the Iraq War as well as the response to Hurricane Katrina. Other notable members of the Bush family include Jeb Bush, another son of George H.W., who served as governor of Florida and ran unsuccessfully for president in 2016, as well as Neil Bush, who is also a businessman. Overall, the Bush family has had a significant impact on American politics and public life, and their legacy continues to be felt today. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Cook family. The legacy of the Cook family dynasty really all starts back with the founding of the Cook Company. The company was founded by Fred C. Cook in 1940 and was later taken over by his sons Charles and David, who transformed it into a major conglomerate. Today, Cook Industries generates billions of dollars in revenue and employs tens of thousands of people around the world. The Cook brothers were also known for their significant involvement in conservative politics and advocacy. They were major donors to a variety of causes and organizations that promoted limited government government, free markets, and individual liberty. The brothers also founded and supported a number of think tanks and political organizations, including the Cato Institute, Americans for Prosperity, and the Charles Cook Foundation, of course. David Cook did pass away a few years ago in 2019, but Charles is still involved, and Cook Industries is said to bring in over $1 trillion in annual revenue, which makes it one of the largest private firms in America. Some speculate that this mass fortune is sometimes used to assist in having a hand in political influence. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Soros family. This family is perhaps best known for its patriarch, George Soros, who is a billionaire investor. Born in Hungary in 1930 and surviving through the atrocities of the Second World War, George would later become a very successful investor, earning his fortune through his hedge fund, Soros Fund Management. It is said that George and his success could largely be attributed to a very famous moment in history. On September 16, 1992, George helped his fund bring in $1 billion in a single day, and he did this by short selling the British pound. This day would go on to become known as Black Wednesday, and went on to solidify him being known as, quote, the man who broke the Bank of England. Today, his family, which includes his children, is among the most powerful families in the world due to their active geopolitical actions. Their influence and interest extends beyond the financial sector, as they are also heavily active in politics as well.
Number 10, the Kennedys. For the older folks at home, this is going to be no surprise, but for the younger audience such as myself, let me explain. The Kennedys were a wealthy and powerful family in the US. A lot of their scandals originating from organized crime, American politics, and some juicy rumors. The most famous Kennedy being JFK. My generation knows him from Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Remember 5? It was a good zombies map. The older generation remembers him for that one Sunday car trip in Dallas. You know what I'm talking about. He may have also been shacking up with Marilyn Monroe. His father was a bootlegger during the Prohibition era, and his family seems to have a lot of plane crashes. For some reason, I'm not sure why. The Kennedys are textbook scandalous and will be talked about for a long time to come. Number 9, the Jacksons. As much as I love fame and fortune, and baby, Chetty's all about that, I wanted to be famous ever since I was a tubby kid, and I'm slowly getting there too. Nice. I don't think I'll ever reach the same level as Michael Jackson. Seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if the first aliens that we meet know the moonwalk. Not because they're from outer space, but because the reach of Michael Jackson knows no bounds. Starting with the Jackson 5 in the 70s and rising to stardom and becoming the biggest star of the 80s and 90s. In the 2000s too. Growing up, he was pretty popular. Multiple allegations of misconduct don't look good on anyone, even for the king of pop though. He's got a few things stacked against him. Number 8, the Trumps. The billionaire extraordinaire turned POTUS is not shy from scandal. And I'm not talking about during his presidency either. I ain't gonna touch that. Some younger folks may not remember Donald Trump from the 80s and 90s, where he was arguably more famous. After getting a small loan of $1 million, built his real estate empire and perhaps broke a few laws and or using legal loopholes to get what he wanted. I mean, can you really trust the guy that slaps his name on everything? Trump Hotel, Trump Airlines, Trump Board Game. And that's just him, I guess.
Time to take life insurance policies out. We're meeting the Castro Angel Landing family. Cult. You know there had to be at least one coming up. They love to call themselves families after all. Angel's Landing is the name of a 20-acre compound outside of Wichita, Kansas, where Lou Castro and a small group of people lived an inexplicably extravagant life in the early 2000s. His followers were convinced he was an angel seer who saw the future and knew how people were gonna die. Turns out the reason he knew was because he was gonna be the one making it happen. Patricia Hughes showed up dead in 2003, and police turned their attention to the secluded luxury compound. There were high-end vehicles and appliances, well-kept lavish homes, pools, and just a lot of wealth that wasn't accounted for or could be explained. Then Patricia's husband dies in 2006 on compound once again by a freak accident, and Ron Goodwin dived into every bit of personal and financial information he could find on the people living at Angel's Landing. Turns out our buddy Castro took out expensive life insurance policies on certain cult members and had them cashed in by other members when someone in the makeshift family accidentally died. This pattern occurred around every 2 years and for about a decade, unnoticed. Turns out his name wasn't even Lou Castro, but Daniel Perez, a man from Texas with many police reports. Perez was charged with 28 felonies, and in February 2015 he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 80 years in prison. The cult was later profiled on an episode of Oxygen's Deadly Cults. Next up is Lucky Luciano. We love a fun and flirty nickname, one he earned for success at evading arrest and winning craps games. Lucky was the most powerful chief of of American organized crime in the early 1930s and a major influence even from prison and after deportation to Italy. At 10, he was already involved in muggings, shoplifting, extortion. After a 6-month jail sentence when he was a teen, Lucky teamed up with Frank Costello and Mayor Lansky and other young gangs, and later New York's rising crime boss Joe Masseria, who he becomes second-hand man to. In October of 1929, he becomes the rare survivor of a one-way ride when he's abducted by 4 men in a car, beaten, stabbed, had his throat slit from ear to ear, and was left for dead. But he survived and never named his abductors. Metal. Lucky had carefully nurtured his contacts with the young powers and had become the boss of all bosses without ever accepting or claiming the title. By 1934, he and the leaders of other crime families had developed the National Crime Syndicate. In 1936, Lucky was indicted, tried, and convicted for his brothels and call girl empire, and was sentenced to Clinton prison for a 30 to 50-year term. From his cell, he continued to rule and issue orders, and in 1942, the luxury liner Normandy was destroyed in the New York Harbor, and Navy intelligence sought Luciano's help in tightening waterfront security. Lucky gave the orders, and sabotage on the docks ended, and in 1946 his sentence was commuted and he was deported to Italy, where he settled in Rome. He then bounced from Cuba to Naples and continued his crime empire until he died of a heart attack in an airport in Naples, Florida in 1962. A family gang of 4 so ferocious they have a catchy nickname to prove it: the Benders. The Benders settled in isolated Labette County, Kansas in the early 1870s following the New Spiritualism movement. This is because Kate, in her early 20s, was renowned for performing seances that showed off her psychic abilities at the store inn that the family ran. But this wasn't as picturesque as it seems. Historians are very confident that the Benders, living as a husband, wife, young adult son, young adult daughter dynamic, actually weren't even related, and none of them were even named Bender. Well, it'd be no biggie if it wasn't for the fact so many people who happened to pass through Labette County never made it to their final destinations, including a well-known local doctor, William York. After a community meeting about York, attended by both of the male Benders, it resulted in a search party formation, and it was soon noted that the Bender homestead appeared recently abandoned and full of evidence. Near the table where the guests were served was a trap door, and the foul-smelling hole beneath the door was just full of blood and gross stuff. The ground in an orchard nearby the house has been carefully plowed, but one small section was noticeably indented. The ground was dug up and revealed the decomposed body of Mr. York. 8 more bodies are found, skulls crushed, throats cut. Guests at the inn were urged to sit at the place of honor, which was a curtain dividing the house's rooms. While dining, the guest of honor would be hit in the head with a hammer from behind the curtain, his throat cut, and then his body dropped in the trap door to the cellar, Sweeney Todd style. Their motive? Robbery, or the thrill of it? Nobody actually knows, because despite a reward and several unsubstantial claims of their capture at the hands of various posses, the Benders appear to have gotten away with it, and their grim story continues to intrigue. One of the few mafiastos to be executed is Louis Lepke Butchialter. Nicknamed Lepkele, Little Louis in Yiddish, then shortened to Lepke, this crime boss was a quiet man for years, managed to avoid public spotlight. In conversations with criminal associates, Lepke preferred listening over talking. He was an overall nice man, appreciated by the community for how he aided his neighbors. He generously compensated his crew members and took them to hockey games, boxing matches, and even winter cruises. He married a widower named Betty and adopted Betty's child from the previous marriage. In the early 1930s, Lepke created an effective process of performing contract killings for the Cosa Nostra mobsters. It had no name, but the press 10 years later called it Murder Inc. The Cosa Nostra mobsters wanted to insulate themselves from any connection to these killings. So, Lepke's partner would relay the contract request from the Costra to Lepke, who would assign it to a street member who had no connections with any major crime family. If they were caught, they could not implicate the Costra members in the crime. They were soon completing jobs all over the country for their mobster bosses, grossing over $1 million in profit per year. Ultimately, Lepke is cornered and forced to surrender after 3 years of hiding when the killing of Joseph Rosen, an informant, goes awry. He's tried for the killing of Rosen alongside 3 other murders, and Lepke is found guilty and sentenced to death. He exhausts his 4 appeals, but is executed by electric chair in 1944. You never know your neighbors, especially if they were Inessa, Roman, and their daughters. Inessa, a kindergarten teacher, and Roman, a successful dentist. Together, Inessa's daughters from her first marriage, 25-year-old Victoria, and just shy of legal daughter Anastasia, are responsible for the violent deaths of at least 30 people across southern Russia. Inessa and her family were highly organized, using information from Roman's sister and brother-in-law who had police connections to organize their crimes around police activity. This is because Inessa liked to go after police officers, as one had left her for another woman in the past. And her current husband didn't feel like she was living in the past either? Okay, alright. right. Their victims weren't exclusively police officers, however. The family MO was breaking and entering the houses of sleeping families while they road tripped under the guise of going on monthly camping trips. One victim was a police officer named Ivan, who was killed when he attempted to stop members of the gang from fleeing the scene of the crime. Roman was eventually killed in a bloody standoff with police, and Inessa was arrested. A search of the family home uncovered a slew of weaponry, a complete arsenal. Inessa, Anastasia, and Victoria all confessed to their crimes, the 6-year reign ending. Vladimir Markin, the chief of Russia's equivalent to the FBI, said, "I'm sure that when they were together, one could hardly imagine that they could even plan a crime." It sounds so much more innocent than it is. The Bean Clan. Picturesque Scotland, a land of mystery and rolling dewy fields, glens, and hills that 100% have eyes. That's right, we're talking about the freaks who inspired the nauseating horror movie that we're never gonna forget anytime soon. Back in the 16th century, Alexander Bean and his partner, Black Agnes Douglas, set up home in a hidden sea cave and started popping out babies. Why? I don't know. Why a cave? Again, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted the saltiest and driest sinuses and intercourse ever. Well, the weirdos never left that cave, and they never let any of the kids leave it either. By keeping it in the family, the clan eventually grew to about 45 members, all starting from just the 2. Jobs were hard to come by when you're not part of society, and potentially terrifying looking from inbreeding, so why not just murk and eat travelers whenever you're feeling peckish or want a new shirt? That's exactly what they did, operating only at night and retiring to their cave by day, where they could enjoy a roasted meal of unfortunate victims and rest like weird hick vampires. Locals had no idea what was going on because they weren't being picked away at like croutons from the veggie tray, and the Bean Clan survived doing this for 25 years, munching down on what's estimated to be about 1,000 people. Naturally, it eventually gets found out by the locals, and they decide to do an old-fashioned mob style on this one. They descend on the cave and cut the off the men, followed by their hands and feet, leaving them to bleed to death. Everyone else was burnt alive. I'm sure if they could have, these weirdos would have attended their own massacre just to snack on their own cooking remains. And now the most dysfunctional family in history, the Ptolemies. The last dynasty of Greek Egypt. Their first 3 monarchs of the dynasty were capable, vigorous sorts that did things like build the great library at Alexandria on their weekends off. But from the 4th century forward, it was nightmarish. It's like they were on a game show where you tried to kill as many of your close relatives as you were able, preferably in as painful and public of a way as possible. This is complicated for 2 reasons. 1, they kept the names in the family. Men were always named Ptolemy, and women 9 times out of 10 were called Cleopatra. 2, they kept their seed in the family too, following the Egyptian tradition, brother and sister wed and had children. This means it's not easy to explain who is killing whom. What follows offered is a kind of prose poem compiled of examples dedicated to the most bestial family in history. Alright, so Ptolemy V was the nicest of the later Ptolemy and thoughtfully had his mother's killers ripped apart by a mob. Ptolemy VI fought his own brother for the throne and then married his sister Cleopatra II. Ptolemy IV kills his mom, who had killed her husband for having a love affair with her mother. Ptolemy VIII was a great enemy of Ptolemy VI and the probable killer of Ptolemy VII. He also married Cleopatra II and then began an affair with Cleopatra's daughter, Cleopatra III. So Ptolemy VIII had Ptolemy VI dismembered and the pieces sent to the mother, Cleopatra II. I could keep going, like for hours. They burned, cooked, eviscerated, literally anything you can think of, they did to one another. All of this comes down to the bottom of the family tree, Cleopatra VII, the daughter of Ptolemy XII, the famous Caesar-loving, Mark Antony-loving Cleopatra who blew Egypt out of the water. I need a water break after that.
Number 10, Bonnie and Clyde. It probably doesn't get any more infamous and more literal than a crime family when talking about Bonnie and Clyde. They were married, they were husband and wife, makes sense. Part of the gangster era in the 1930s America, Bonnie and Clyde were some of the worst crooks you could come across. Responsible for jailbreaks, bank robberies, unaliving police, and just looking nasty while doing it. A real sweet couple. Their days of crime came to an end when police finally caught up with the young dangerous couple and welcomed them with a barrage of bullets. Bonnie and Clyde were not great actors, but after that they did a great Swiss cheese impression. Fought the law, and the law won.
Number 9, the Winter Hill Gang. One of the most successful organized crime groups in American history, the Winter Hill Gang was actually a team of a bunch of Boston area crime groups. The Irish-American group ran around all over Goodwill Hunting Stopping Ground and were best known for fixing horse races. The gang was famously taken over by James J. Whitey Bulger, who is just an absolutely lovely person. We should just tell them to go watch that movie with Johnny Depp. What's it called?
That movie, you know, it's that one.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it's called.
Apparently he does a really good job. The gang disbanded in the late 90s-ish, or at least as far as I know.
Number 8, Lucchese Family. This is a list of the worst and most dishonorable families, so there was a good chance that La Cosa Nostra was going to show up here. Organized crime is nothing new in America. Cities like New York and Chicago have a beautiful Italian-American culture, but also the Mafia. Don't forget, they're there too. One such is the Lucchese family. The same one featured in Goodfellas. Now go see that movie. That's a classic. I know the title of that one. Go see that one. It's a good one. The family was responsible for enough crimes to make the rap sheet wrap around your head twice. Most famously, however, was the Lufthansa heist. A heist at JFK Airport back in 1978, stealing an estimated $5.7 million. Now remember, keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends.
No Pep in his servant steps for sure, it's Pepi. So, Pepi the First kills the game. He does a great job ruling Egypt. He initiated the policy of intensive penetration of Nubia, south of the First Nile Cataract. Inscriptions record journeys southward early in his reign, and fragments of vessels bearing the king's name were excavated in Karma. Meanwhile, Pepi II is the longest running Egyptian monarch, surviving 94 years on the throne. He's also believed to be the youngest ruler ever in Egyptian history. Pepi II was the son of Pepe I, obviously, and was born late into his father's reign. While he was still very young, he succeeded his half-brother Marine, who died at an early age. His mother served as regent for a number of years, and the old group of officials serving the royal family maintained the kingdom's stability. During the first half of his rule, he brought prosperity and grandeur to Egypt. Second half? Nowhere close. You see a sharp decline of the old kingdom as economic disarray is caused by him virtually having no oversight. Powerful provincial nobles drew talent away from the capital, and because of the unusually long reign of the king, Egypt had a senile ruler when it needed vigorous leadership. Those of Pepi's children who survived him had brief ephemeral reigns and failed to cope with the political and economic crisis that arose as the 6th dynasty ended. His tomb may be more famous than he is. Menkaures. His tomb, the Pyramid of Menkaure, is one of 3 pyramids of Giza, alongside his statue triads that show the king together with his wives and various deities. It's the smallest of the 3 main pyramids of Giza, just 62 meters tall, but has one of the most complex and best preserved structures. He had 2 wives, both are his sisters naturally, and they didn't have much luck with sons at first. 3 in total and 1 daughter. At his death, his successor, his son, Shapeshifters, completed the stonework walls of the mortuary temple in brick. Menaku was not succeeded by his eldest son, who actually predeceased him, but rather by Shepsake, a younger son. Shepsake built a monumental mastaba at the South Accra and was the only kingdom ruler to not build a pyramid. This family's work, especially the Great Pyramids, show a great mastery of monumental stoneworking. Individual blocks were large or colossal and were extremely accurately fitted. They were good, and then they were great, and then they were absolute trash. The Amenhotep. Alright, so on the top of the bucket we got Amen I. He's the great-great-granddaddy. He effectively extended Egypt's boundaries into Nubia. Next is great-granddaddy Amen II, who was an army leader with famous archery and battle skills. Supposedly he was able to shoot arrows straight through a thick of copper plates. His athletic ability was incredible, and he was known to have rowed a ship faster than 200 of Egypt's strongest navy men. Next is Granddaddy Amen III, who built himself endless monuments and temples. Perhaps his most famous construction was the Temple of Luxor in Thebes. This temple has become one of the grandest and most famous temples in Egypt. His diplomatic relations allowed art and culture to flourish, and his building projects are legendary. And then there's disastrous daddy Akhenaten, or Amen IV. This nutcase was obsessed with the sun god Atum and changed his name, appearance, politics, lifestyle, anything he could to feel closer to his lord. This pharaoh was so hated that Egyptians themselves wiped his name from their history. He moved Egypt's capital from Thebes to Amarna and then renamed it in Egyptian to mean the horizon of Aten, and then ordered a new capital city be built there, moving an estimated 20,000 people over to make it. When he enforced monotheism, Og failed to realize that the temples of Egypt were the nation's socio-economic cultural hubs. It was the god priests that oversaw all of their industries, so without them, those pillars of the communities were just gone. And stripping these temples of authority, he caused Egypt's biggest reception. And then we've got the bottom of the bucket, we have our boy Tukmahad, aka King Tut, who by his 3rd year changed his name to Tukmahad and issued decree restoring temples, images, personnel, and privileges of the old gods to undo what his dad had done. He also began the protracted process of restoring the sacred shrines of Amun, which had been severely damaged during his father's rule. No proscription or persecution of Aton, though, Akhenaten's god, was undertaken, and royal vineyards and regiments of the army were still named after Aton. Tukmahad unexpectedly died in his his 19th year. Whatever the case, he died without designating an heir. This is another 4-part family tree. First, great-granddaddy Snarfu founds the 4th dynasty and marries the daughter of the last pharaoh of the 3rd empire, thus helped to solidify his possession as the pharaoh of the new dynasty, as well as secure Khufu's place in the line of succession. Meanwhile, his son, who becomes Granddaddy Khufu, pops out the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Apparently, we were so impressed by this that we forgot to write anything else about him or why he did this, because we know very little about Khufu. We know he reigned 23 years between 2500 and 2566, and we know he married his sister. Shocker. Khufu traded for highly rare items, prizing both construction materials and precious materials like copper and turquoise, and so he developed the mining industry in Egypt. Limestone and granite were also quarried in vast amounts for rather large building projects that he was working on. Built over a period of 27 years, the Great Pyramid is undoubtedly Khufu's greatest legacy. Khufu's children include 9 sons and 6 daughters, including Defreya and Khafre, who would both become pharaohs following his death. When in power, his son Defreya moved 8 kilometers north of Giza and established a new necropolis on a higher leveled ground. Defreya's pyramid was quarried for its stone, and as such, there's very little of it left standing today. Meanwhile, the underson Khafre succeeded the short-lived Radifi and married his sister and 2 other queens who were probably his sisters. Best known for his pyramid, one of the 3 great pyramids of Giza, and also best known for the Sphinx, which bears his likeness on its face. And who else but the Ramses clan? The Ramses I gets the throne in a super uneventful way. He was friend and confidant to the former pharaoh who didn't have a single heir. Then Ramses spent all of his free time marrying all 4 of his daughters. Meanwhile, his son, Seti I, led a great army of 60,000 men and fought in many battles north of Palestine and Syria. King Ramesses II, son of Seti I, was able to finish his father's work by beating the Hittite army in Battle of Kadesh and creating the first documented peace treaty in history. Ramesses II went on to declare himself a god and rule Egypt for 67 years before dying of natural causes at 90, which is insane in an era where life expectancy was 30. But before getting to that ripe old age, Ramses spent any free time he had chasing anything with 2 feet and a heartbeat, enough to sire 100 to 200 children in his lifetime. He even outlived 12 of his own sons, leaving no heir. They're back again, the Ptolemies! People loved learning about this batch of literal bastards in the recent top 10 powerful families in history you didn't want to mess with video. Apparently y'all like when I'm doing tongue twisters. For those who don't know why this family could be a tongue twister, an important note is that they always recycled the family names. Men always named Ptolemy, and women always named Cleopatra or Berenice. They also happen to really take the old Egyptian ideology of royals only being with other royals a little too seriously. What's created is a massive family tree, one full of manipulation, contempt, scandal, and brash killings. While the Ptolemies started off strong, building the Library of Alexandria, compiled a star catalog and the earliest surviving table of trigonomic function, and establishing mathematically that an object is and its mirror image must make an equal angles to be a mirror. After the 4th, however, the family became like the Kardashians, talentless and messy. They took up everybody's time, but nobody stopped the free entertainment. So, like last time, let me limber up and I'll run us through some of the notorious BS. Ptolemy IV killed his mother, who had killed her husband, who was having a love affair with her mother, and then married his sister Arinso III, who was then later killed after Ptolemy IV died. Ptolemy XII annoyed his children so much, particularly his daughter Berenice IV, that they rebelled against him and drove him from Egypt. Berenice IV ruled briefly. She probably had her sister killed. She certainly had her husband strangled, who wasn't a family member. She was beheaded on the orders of her father. Ptolemy XII. Ptolemy XIV was the younger brother of Cleopatra VII, that's the Mark Antony one, and possibly poisoned by that same sister. Ptolemy VII was then killed by his uncle, the next Ptolemy VIII, at a wedding feast, or he may have been killed by his own father, Ptolemy IV. Scholars disagree. It's so messy, my mouth's so dry. Let's go on to the next one. Our favorite bearded lady was part of this family. It's the Thutmose line. Granddaddy Thutmose I became king after Amenhotep died without an heir. Probably one of the previous monarch's generals, he came to the throne around age 40 and is thought to have ruled for a little over 10 years. Historians have generally described Thutmose II as a frail and ineffectual, just the sort of person that a purposely shrewish Hatshepsut could push around. Public monuments, however, depict a dutiful Hatshepsut standing appropriately next to her husband. Wife to Tut II, Hatshepsut failed in the more important duty of producing a son. So when Thut II died young in 1497, yet again, the throne went to a harem child. Duly named Thutmose III, this child was destined to become one of the great warrior kings of Egypt, but at the time of his father's death, he was too young to take the rule. As widow, Hat became regent leader until Thut came of age. Within a few years, however, she proclaimed herself pharaoh, a vile absurd. And the 7 years past that point, she'd taken up cross-dressing imagery. Once depicted as slim and graceful queen, is now full-blown flail and crook-wielding king with the broad bare chest of a man and the pharaoh false beard, but also still long flowing hair and feminine features. Upon Hat's death in 1458, her stepson, then likely in his early 20s, finally ascended to the throne. Thutmose III was a skilled warrior who brought Egypt's empire to the zenith of its power by conquering all of Syria and crossing the Euphrates. The spoils from his many wars made Thutmose III the richest man in the world. His military accomplishments are recorded on the numerous monuments he built himself. Alright, so the Cambyses are up first. Cambyses was the son of Cyrus I and the successor of his father in Anshan as the king of Agistius of Media. According to the 5th century BC Greek historian Herodotus, Cambyses married a daughter of Astydius, by whom he became the father of Cyrus II. Cambyses II, aka Cyrus II, performed the ritual duties of the Babylonian king at the important New Year festival of 538 and of 530. Before Cyrus set out on his last campaign, he was appointed the regent in Babylon. That campaign was the conquest of Egypt, planned by Cyrus, and was a major achievement of Cambyses' reign once captured. This is the lunatic who liked to torture animals for entertainment and notoriously killed the Apis bull to torment the Greeks who worshipped it. Cambyses was traveling through Syria on his way back to Persia when he first heard reports of a revolt there, and then he died mysteriously in Syria in the summer of 522, either by his own hand or as the result of an accident. This is one of the few Persian families to have held the throne, the Xerxes line. First we have the granddaddy Xerxes I, or the Great as titled by the 5th Persian king. He was the son of Darius the Great, and his reign lasted from 486 BC to 465 BC. He's well known in history for his attempted invasion of Greece and how later in the same year he was defeated in the Battle of Salamis, which led him to flee his own kingdom. He's known as both a Persian ruler and a pharaoh, as when he ruled Egypt it was also part of the Persian Empire. Little is known about the last years of Xerxes' life. After his reversal in Greece, he withdrew into himself and allowed himself to be drawn into his harem intrigues, in which he was in fact only a pawn. Thus he disposed of his brother's entire family at the demand of the queen. He was assassinated by his own commander of the royal bodyguard forces. Another son, Artaxerxes I, succeeded in retaining power. Artaxerxes I was given the throne by the commander of the guard, Artabanus, who had killed Xerxes. It's fine though, cause Xerxes Jr. got his daddy's lick back when he kills Arta about a month later. His reign, though generally peaceful, was disturbed by several insurrections, the first of which was the revolt of his brother. During his reign, Artaxerxes completed the Hall of 100 Columns at Persepolis, rebuilt the palace of Darius I at Susa after a fire, and Artaxerxes died of natural causes in 424 BCE, having ensured a peaceful succession by naming Xerxes II his legitimate heir. Xerxes II reigned for only a little over a month, however, before he was assassinated. Next is the Dosier line. Starting with Dasi Dosier from the Second Kingdom, Egypt's 3rd dynasty. He undertook the construction of the earliest important stone buildings in Egypt. His reign, which probably lasted 19 years, was marked by great technological innovation in the use of stone architecture. The innovative structure was a departure from the traditional use of mud bricks alongside stone. The greatest advance, however, was the completion of alteration of the shape of a monument from a flat-topped rectangular structure known as a mastaba to a 6-stepped pyramid. This great character built the famous pyramid and set up the construction mechanisms of large buildings, paving the way for successors of their kingdom for even more daring constructions. The Pyramid of Dosier is the first pyramid in history of ancient Egypt and therefore therefore potentially all of humanity. It is a degree pyramid that is at the center of a funerary complex of great importance. It's located in the necropolis of Saqqara. Sekhmet is probably the brother or eldest son of King Dosier. Little is known about this king since he ruled for only a few years. However, he erected a step pyramid at Saqqara and left behind a well-known rock inscription at the Wadi Maghara.
Number 7, the Rockefeller. Donald Trump might have been a billionaire or the most famous billionaire, but I still think J.D. Rockefeller takes the cake. And his family, actually. A little history lesson here. Rockefeller, in a nutshell, was the first modern billionaire. Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark levels of wealth. Seriously, he was pretty rich. When oil and gas became big business in the late 1880s because Industrial Revolution, cars, we need oil, his company, Standard Oil, slowly rose up until they had a monopoly on the oil industry. By cutting out middlemen and cornering the market, he amassed billions. Today, adjusted for inflation, his pockets were lined with a very healthy $23 billion. Say it again, $23 billion. That was all the way back then. Way before Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Buffett did it. I wouldn't mind $23 billion myself. Sounds good, right? Oh, all the McDonald's I could have. Oh yeah. Number 6, the Coppolas. Imagine being a not so well-known director, then Marlon Brando walks in the room and goes, "Let's make a movie." The Godfather, great movie, right? Well, it seems that filmmaking runs in the family. Awesome. A whole family of people involved in film. You gotta love that. I love film, that's awesome. However, for those fans of The Godfather, which if you haven't seen it, please do. It's a masterpiece, go see it. What's not a masterpiece, however, is The Godfather 3. You can skip that one. I can just imagine the look on people's faces when they thought they were going to see a trilogy completed masterfully. It's a real stinker, folks, for many reasons, but a big one is Sofia Coppola, who plays Michael Corleone's daughter in the movie, which in real life is Francis Ford Coppola's daughter, the director of the movie. Imagine taking one of the best movie licenses of all time and almost single-handedly ruining that. Sorry, Dad. Number 5, the Kardashians. Everybody knows the Kardashians. Everybody and everyone knows that they've had tons of scandals. Kim Kardashian being married to Kanye West is just scandal by proxy. Come on, that guy's crazy. She also had a tape that got out. Not her best moment. Mr. Kardashian was a lawyer on the O.J. Simpson case where he may or may not have done it. And of course, Kris Jenner married Bruce Jenner, and who's now the fabulous Caitlyn Jenner, and her daughter was in a weird Pepsi commercial this one time, and this whole list could be about them, honestly. Strangely enough, for people who generally don't have talent in Hollywood, they sure get a lot of press. Which at some point is annoying, I'm sure. But be nice, paparazzi, or no Christmas presents. I know Santa Claus. And I'm keeping a list. It's early, but I'm keeping a list this year. Number 4, the Queen. Being the Queen of England is hard, or so I'm told. I mean, it must be kind of nice to sit in a big palace all day, eating cucumber sandwiches, and getting lost in such a big place. I know I would. I would get lost for sure. The royal family, however, are no saints and have their fair share of scandals. Prince Andrew has gotten himself into some trouble in recent tabloids. But for some who don't know, Prince Harry was quite the wild child 20 years ago. A prince on the loose, if you will. Not to mention the whole debacle with Princess Diana. The car accident is a little sus, not gonna lie. Even way back in the day when both world wars were on, there was some minor cover-up to hide the family's German heritage. Kinda hard to fight the Germans when your queens are one of the Germans. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. As long as there's a crown, there's always gonna be scandal. Number 3, Wally World. That's what my family calls Walmart. I don't know, that's just what we call it. The Walmart family is quite wealthy and tied to the Walmart Corporation, of course. And if you didn't know, Walmart doesn't have a squeaky clean track record. You mean a multi-billion-dollar department store located in over 20 countries around the world hasn't been to every rule and law applied to them? Oh, I'm shooketh. Not to diss Walmart, I love you guys. You got some good deals there, but there's no way anyone at home hasn't heard horror stories about working there. Come on, I know you're like, yeah, you're thinking about it right now, I know you are. On a more heinous note, Walmart's production methods are uncouth, as they use a version of labor I'm not allowed to say on YouTube. But in short, their clothes are cheaply made and then sold at a huge markup. But because the production was so cheap, you can walk in there and buy a shirt for $15 and you feel like you saved. You feel good. Oh, there's a McDonald's. I'm gonna go there later. Nice. It's great. I love capitalism. It's the best. Number 2, the Genovese. Probably the most infamous crime family to ever exist, or ask for protection money. One of the 5 families of New York, the Genovese family were wise guys, good fellas, tough guys, made men, part of the crew, and like Don Rickles said once, probably sat around all day and smelling their guns. I love Don Rickles. It would be difficult to quantify everything the crime family had going for them. What separates the Italian mafia from everyday hoodlums is that they are organized, hence the name organized crime. Profiteering off anything they could really. Illicit substances, rackets, scams, gambling, and connections everywhere really. Watch The Irishman, it's on Netflix, it's a good movie. You'll know what I mean. Hey Frank, what do you want to do later, Frank? Number 1, the Clintons. Hillary, don't come in the room. Probably the grooviest president ever to hold office. Bill Clinton was president around the time I was born, so I'm not that familiar with his politics and policies. And when I think of the late 90s, I think of Nintendo 64, Tony Hawk, and MTV, so it would be difficult for me to talk about that in any way, really. Is the Clinton family a bunch of wealthy American leaders who have some ill-gotten gains and email deleters? Yes, most likely, but you all know why this is number 1, don't you? Did you really think that me, Big Chetty, was going to talk about Clinton and not talk about his impeachment? Being one of only 3 presidents to have that process fully started. Interesting, I didn't know that. What were you guys thinking about? What were you talking about? There's nothing else he did wrong, right? He's innocent, he's good. Who? Monica Lewinsky. Who's that? She did what with his what?
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Kensington system. Queen Victoria's reign began in 1837 and it lasted up until her death in 1901. She was just 18 years old when she found herself on the throne, and it was all by chance, as she was actually 5th in line when she was born. This is all stressful enough, but certainly one of the worst parts of her upbringing was being brought up under the Kensington system. This basically all started when her mother, Duchess Victoria of Kent, created this system in order to control her daughter, literally just isolated her away from all of her friends and even from other family members, and apparently this was done to keep her quote-unquote pure. The Duchess would monitor her every move, she would decide who she could see and who she could speak to, and Victoria only had 2 friends she could play with growing up, one being her half-sister and the other being her mother's attendant, Sir John Conroy. Victoria was even forced to share a room with her mother until she was queen. She couldn't even walk down the hall by herself. In the end, Victoria placed a lot of blame on John Conroy for manipulating her mother. She even called him the demon incarnate. In our number 9 spot today, we have the royal affairs. There have been many rumors over the years about the royal family and their extramarital affairs. Okay, I'm not saying it's a tradition, but it happens a lot, and I'm saying this goes way back. So far back that one of the first accusations of this within the royal family dates all the way back to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Since then, it has only continued with people such as Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend, Princess Anne and Commander Timothy Lawrence, and of course King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, just to name a few. The latter of those definitely being the most famous, especially when the now king was confronted about it by his wife at the time, the beloved Princess Diana. Apparently, King Charles responded to the confrontation by saying, quote, "Well, I refuse to be the only Prince of Wales who never had a mistress." Maybe not the attitude to keep when you're speaking to your wife, who you're cheating on. I don't know. Guess I'm just not royal enough to get it. In our number 8 spot today, we have pets. As we all know very well, image is everything for the royal family, and that is down to the finest, smallest detail, including pets. It is well known that the queen absolutely loved corgis, and how could we possibly blame her? Apparently, however, if a dog is not a corgi or a Labrador, it is socially looked down upon. Can't describe how insane that is. They're dogs. If you brought a dog who had just been rolling around in the mud everywhere with you, I could see why that wouldn't be as widely accepted among fancy social circles, but only giving the choice of a few random breeds seems kind of ridiculous. Apparently, Meghan Markle actually had to give up her beagle named Guy a few years ago before she joined the family, and then left it. I guess she can probably have whatever dog she wants now, so there's always an upside. In our number 7 spot today, we have King Rudolph II. The Holy Roman Emperor from 1552, he was known as a collector. Some princes collect stamps, others collect zoo animals. A little more badass if you ask me. His castle was home to lions, tigers, and orangutans, so good luck getting a full 8 hours of sleep. He also collected human artifacts. So yeah, it's a bit odd, isn't it? Imagine having company, don't step in lion crap, and also don't mind the jars of eyes. Cheers! King Rudolph II, he's quite important in history. He supported the scientific revolution quite a bit. He also poured tons of money into astrology, so he was into cool stuff too, besides the kidneys and kangaroo collections. In our number 6 spot today we have King George IV. Voted as England's worst king by historians, let's do it! King George IV was too invested in his intimate conquests. He was focused on all the wrong stuff and he was also just horrible about it. This king tried everything to get a woman to sleep with him. He would throw tantrums if a crush wasn't interested, and sometimes he would threaten to end his own life if he didn't get their attention. Super creepy, because on top of the lengths he would go to just to get some time alone, he also kept some of their hair after the dirty deed was done. Yeah, he would ask everybody he slept with for a lock of their hair. Back then it was kind of common for lovers to keep locks of each other's hair, but George's collection was alarming because of just how many locks of hair there were. After the king died, his brothers found 7,000 envelopes, each with a lock of hair. Just envelopes of hair. The collection was, quote, enough to stuff a sofa. This insane collection is now in a museum in Scotland, so check that out if you want to feel sick. In our number 5 spot today we have Christian VII. Christian. An ironic name for what I'm about to tell you. The young prince that couldn't keep his hands out of his pants. Let's mention him. Christian VII of Denmark, he was, as I said, a wee young lad, and of course a wee bit spoiled. Very comfortable with his body though, I'll say. More often than not, he would just have his hands in his pants. Middle of dinner, passing food around to his family, alternating hands in the pants to hands on food. This should have been number 1, now that I think of it. What a little shit. It's unknown, but historians believe maybe he was a wee bit mad. Who's to tell? Either way, don't touch the rye bread, Christian. Thanks so much. In our number 4 spot today we have King Henry VIII. Of course we have to talk about Henry VIII, he's pretty bad. Henry VIII was the King of England from 1509 to 1547. He's been married a handful of times and they all went south. When Henry married Catherine Howard, he was 49 and Catherine was a lot younger. Classic 1500s stuff. After the two were married, Henry was not the same as he was when they had met. He had since received a nasty jousting wound to the face, was gravely overweight, and never wanted to do anything with Catherine. So Catherine, of course, just wanting some shred of a life, and being, again, quite young, decided to look for love. Well, God forbid. God forbid you try and have a life in the 1500s. The young queen was accused of having an affair and was publicly and horribly taken out in the courtyard. She was accused of cheating before they even got married, and in turn, lost her head. Horrible times. In our number 3 spot today we have Don Carlos. Prince of Asturias in the mid-1500s, the Spanish prince who just enjoyed being the worst human alive. Back in the mid-1500s, the eldest son to King Philip II of Spain was a horrible person. Now, it's been noted that he was born with a hunchback and one leg was shorter. Historians like to bring that up first and how maybe he had the odds against him physically. That sucks on one hand, but it's how you deal with it and how you deal with others that shows what type of person you are, let alone leader. Don Carlos was made hero of the opera by his dad, Philip II of Spain, so right off the hop, easy promotion. All about who you know. Don Carlos would hurt people a lot. He would hurt animals for fun as well. As a true crime enthusiast, you know that's a red flag. According to historians, Don Carlos once made a cobbler eat a pair of boots because he didn't like how they looked. He made somebody eat a pair of boots. We're not going to feel bad for Don Carlos on Bumblebee today. No sir, he was set up to marry Elizabeth of Valios, the eldest daughter of King Henry II, but after a few hours with the man, she decided there's absolutely no way in hell, so she married his father instead, King Philip, in 1560. In 1564, a few brides were lined up for Don Carlos, Mary Queen of Scots, Margaret of Valios, and Anne of Austria. When Carlos was plotting to take out his own father, he was caught and imprisoned in solitary confinement until his death 6 months later. In our number 2 spot today we have the personal sheet changer. I can't tell if this is the worst job to have or the best. Here we go. Royals have been sweating constantly about people trying to take them out. Taylor's mentioned Boy Jones on here a few times. That guy that stalked the queen. It's terrifying. People are terrifying. Boy Jones would go through the queen's drawers. Big ew. So historically, the royal family would try their best to anticipate an attack, be as safe as you can be, like the kissing sheets for example. Have you ever heard about this royal position? A great deal of monarchs hired taste testers to make sure nobody poisoned them, and they also had a guy get tucked in the king's sheets. I would much rather have the latter. King Henry VIII hired somebody to make sure his bed wasn't poisoned, so you were required to make the king's bed every morning, but you also had to rub all the sheets down before bedtime. You'd have to kiss the bed sheets to make sure that they weren't poisoned. Sleep tight, all safe here. Don't mind the bad breath on all of your pillows. You're safe though. Alright, time to clock out for the day. Clothes as well, that was touched. Maybe not kissed, but for sure touched. Guys wearing my clothes in my bed, no way I'd rather get poisoned. Take my jeans off. In our number 1 spot today we have King Louis XIV. We gotta talk about perhaps one of the worst sights to see in the royal household. Back in the olden days, enemas were the talk of the town. Rather, the palace. Like most things in the 1400s, only the rich could afford the enema supplies, specifically King Louis XIV. Guy loved enemas. It is believed that over the course of his life, Louis XIV received thousands of enemas. In just 1 year, Louis received 212 enemas. He would always take it a step further, and dare I say a step fancier, by using almond milk. Imagine being married to a guy and he pulls out the almond milk. Like, not again, Louis, come on. I just ate, man. No.
So, to start, it's Genghis Khan. That's probably the most obvious start in this case. Good old Genghis was the ruler and emperor of the Mongol Empire, the largest empire in history. How'd he do that? Well, even if they were outnumbered, which they usually were, the Mongols were masters of tactical and psychological warfare. They always had one-time offer for any city or civilization they came across. If this people in the town surrendered, the Mongols would treat them well and allow them the fruits of a secure world. They had considerable personal liberty, religious freedoms, and overall more rights. Once the Mongols were empowered, their land was safe and well controlled. If, however, the people resisted the Mongol advance, they and their cities would feel the full fury of the enraged invaders. The Mongols were violent, decapitating a path from the west shores of the Black Sea to the Pacific. Some experts calculate that fully 11% of the world's population died because of the Mongol expansion. He died in 1227 himself after defeating the Tanguts, and he left his successor and sons to handle everything. Don't think they were any better, however. His grandson told the Pope that he'd only protect Christian pilgrimage to Jerusalem if the Pope brought every king of Christendom to Khan to swear fealty. And his son committed one of the worst Mongol atrocities recorded against the Oryats. So I could go on, but we got more freaks to talk about. Your takeaway is don't mess with a Mongol. Ed Hardy fans, you'll know this one, the Krays. Dramatized in the 2015 movie Legends, these identical twins are unique in comparison to other criminal empire leaders. They ruled East End London with an iron fist during the swingin' 60s. Their criminal empire depended on robbery and protection rackets to thrive. The Krays and their associates would ensure compliance by readily resorting to arson, assault, and killings. The fear they inspired stopped even the most cowardly of snitches from saying a peep. They operated out of a nightclub and they were familiar figures on the street. But the streets are different during the day, and surprising to many, ordinary people who were untouched by the Krays' business interests actually revered them. They acted as a sort of local authority, helping people with their problems, debts, hurtful spouses, or failing homes. They guaranteed safety on the street and delivered it. It wasn't even just the ordinary people that admired the Kray brothers, but celebrities and politicians too. The police arrested them in 1968 after Ronnie's mental decline, caused by his refusal to take medication, led to the operation to make some sloppy mistakes. AKA, he literally killed 2 people at separate public events. 2 occasions, guys. Ronnie was sent to a high security psychiatric facility due to his instability, but also his homosexuality. Unfortunately, that's how the times were. He died in 1995 while his brother died in 2000, 5 weeks after authorities released him from prison on a compassion ground for his terminal cancer. This Spanish family has lurid tales, but are they fact or are they fiction? The Borgias. Originally from Spain, the family became important in 15th century political and religious world. Caesar, the Borgias patriarch's father, was elected pope in 1492 of the titular church of Santa Maria Nova, making Caesar the archbishop and later the cardinal in 1492. Caesar, however, had no interest in religious vocation. He was
better known at the papal court for his hunting parties and amorous liaisons and flashy clothes, rather than meticulous religious observations. On the death of Pedro Luis in 1488, the title of Duke of Granada had been handed past him and gone to his younger brother Juan. When Juan was mysteriously murdered in 1497, the rumor gradually spread that Cesar was the culprit. Ambitious and hungry for yet more power, the family included two popes, one of which was Alexander, the father of the famous Lucrezia. Her family was perfectly happy to use her as a pawn in their power plays. She entered into several arranged marriages, each one helped the Borgias extend their grip. She's also what inspired the belief that they really kept it in the family. After retiring to Naples after being a professional wife, Giovanni, dubbed the Roman infant, is seen at approximately age 3 for the first time. Two papal bulls recognize the child as an illegitimate son of first Caesar, her uncle, and then of Alexander, her dad, who probably was the true father. The mysterious origin of the child, as well as her presence at a celebrated night group romp in the Vatican, has been used to support the rumors. You can learn more about this disastrous family in a 3-season TV drama literally named after them, The Borgias.
In our number 7 spot today, we have King Charles I. Okay, this is one that goes way back and it really creeps me out. So King Charles I, right now we're on the 3rd, so we're taking it a couple back. King Charles I was tried for treason after the Civil War, and he ended up being beheaded in 1649. I guess in the 1600s everyone was beheaded, so this wasn't necessarily abnormal, which is certainly weird, but that's a history lesson for another day. The weird part of this, however, is that apparently his head was sewn back on his body so that he could sit for a portrait, or it was perhaps supposed to be a sign of respect. Either way, it's very weird and very gross. I feel terrible for whoever's job it was to do that, and I also feel bad for the artist who was forced to paint that. Talk about traumatic. It does certainly make sense though that people say that Charles' ghost still haunts a building, because there is no amount of haunting that could make up for being beheaded and then having your head sewn back onto your body. Okay, why'd we do the first part if we were gonna do the second? Could've just cut the middleman, you know? But instead, they cut his head off, okay? In our number 6 spot today, we have never travel in pairs. This is one travel rule that certainly makes sense, but it is really dark when you think about it. This rule is one that the British royal family, and honestly many people who can afford this sort of luxury safety, do nowadays. This tradition and rule is one that means that any heirs to the throne are not allowed to travel together. This is of course in case some sort of accident happens. Not every heir to the throne would be injured or perhaps killed. It's definitely very smart and sensible, but it has got to be grim, just constantly preparing for the worst thing to happen. It is of the utmost importance to the royal family that they preserve the line to the throne. Like I mentioned before, however, other people are now taking a page out of the royal book and are using this travel rule where possible. In our number 5 spot today, we have the black outfit. Another travel rule that the royal family must follow is in regards to an item that they have to bring with them on all trips, whether business or pleasure. It is pretty unusual to see the royal family dressed in black, despite when a specific occasion calls for it, but every time they travel, they're required to bring an all-black outfit with them. This is to prepare for the worst case scenario. If they are away on a trip and somebody important to them passes away, they need to ensure that they are ready with the appropriate clothing for when they're able to touch down on their home soil. This is of course very practical, but it's definitely kind of morbid. I mean, you're having to fuss over what you're gonna wear when you're actually just mourning the loss of someone close to you. It certainly wouldn't be the top of my list of things to focus on, but maybe that's why I'm not cut out for royalty. Okay. In our number 4 spot today, we have the rules of the road. Okay, this rule or tradition or law, I guess, is probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard, but I guess it's been around for quite a while and I just had no idea. As it turns out, the monarch is the only person in the UK who is allowed to drive without a legal license or even license plates. That's insane. I didn't expect the king to have to take a driver's test like everyone else, but just having a rule that allows them, if they chose to drive without any idea how? It's pretty bizarre. The good news is though, which makes this rule make a lot more sense, is that of course, rather than driving himself, King Charles' chauffeur will be much more responsible for most of the driving for the king. Let's just hope the chauffeur has their driver's license. I'm not gonna lie, there's this silly photo of the queen, and every time I think about the monarch driving without a license, I just think of this little photo. She's got a little silly grin on her face. She looks mischievous. And that's what I like to think, her just driving with no license. In our number 3 spot today, we have the armed forces. This is a tradition or system that comes into play when a new monarch comes into power. So last year this happened with the king after the passing of the queen. It is definitely one of the most intimidating parts of his new role, and this is that King Charles now becomes the head of the armed forces. This means that it is his responsibility, and he is the only person who can declare when the country is at war and when the war is over. Of course, he won't be doing this entirely alone. He needs to follow the advice and guidance of the government. The perhaps good news is that the new king has held quite close ties to the armed forces throughout his life, even spending time in the Royal Navy and taking flying instruction from the Royal Air Force during his second year at Cambridge University. Of course, the hope is that he won't have to be in a position to make these difficult decisions, but when or if he's faced with them, we can hope he makes the proper decisions for the country. In our number 2 spot today, we have no touching. There is a rule that you just cannot touch a royal. I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons for this, mostly to do with security, but aside from a very lucky handshake, you really are supposed to keep your distance. I suppose it's because I live the life of a regular person, but I kind of feel like in some ways this might be a little sad. I feel like you might be lacking in so much connection with a ton of interesting people, and like some of the people that you meet, wouldn't you just be dying to hug them? You know, apparently this is part of the reason why the queen always wore gloves. She of course shook a lot of hands while making her royal appearances, and the same will likely go for the new king. Maybe he'll take up gloves as a fashion accessory, just like his mother. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the church. So we talked about the armed forces, and King Charles won't only be the head of the armed forces, but he will also become the head of the church in England. Quite a jump from talking about war and being the one who makes those kinds of decisions to being the head of the church, where things hopefully are quite the opposite. This is a post that British monarchs have held since the church was founded by King Henry VIII in the 1500s, and it appears as though the tradition will carry on. In this role, it means that King Charles will be responsible for appointing archbishops and bishops to their role. The king will of course be advised in this role by the Prime Minister, and it is said that the king is religious in his own right and that he has already spoken about how his personal faith has informed his approach to leadership. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have King Henry VIII. We'll start off this list with some 1500s dating drama. I love it. The 4th wife of Henry VIII, Anne of Cleves, was married to King Henry for 6 months. It was seen as quite strategic, actually. See, Henry's chief minister convinced him to marry one of the sisters of Germany's duke, either Anne or Amelia. So in order to decide, Henry requested that Hans Holbein, famous painter, travel all the way to Cleves to paint a portrait of each sister. This is like ancient Tinder. It's wild. This man compared portraits for a few days and then finally chose Anne because every man praiseth her beauty. He even compared her to a silver moon. I've never heard Taylor compare me to the silver moon, so it seems like he's gotta step his game up. So eventually a treaty was signed, and a few weeks later Anne arrived to England. Henry was beyond upset because when she arrived, she apparently looked nothing like the portrait. How horrible is that? It's 6 AM, you just met your new husband after traveling upriver by barge, and the dude has the audacity to say you don't resemble a Victorian painting. Awesome! He even tried to stop the wedding, but it was too late at that point, so they had to follow through. Imagine still having to follow through. On January 6th, 1540, their marriage was official, but soon after, Anne gladly accepted the divorce, then lived as the king's sister peacefully until her death in 1557. Historians believe that it was cancer. In our number 9 spot today, we have King James. Before I dive into this one, guys, don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you're enjoying the video. It does really help us out. Not to be confused with LeBron James, this is a different king. In an official 16th century medical book, the actual medical advice at one point was to not bathe. Quote, "Use not baths or stews, nor sweat too much, for all openeth the pores of a man's body, and maketh the venomous air to enter, and for to infect the blood." First of all, why is every shred of medical knowledge from the past always written in riddles? God forbid you have bronchitis in the 16th century, a doctor would be like, "Ah yes, just a drop of ale and a witch's flick, you'll be well on your way." Like, bro, I have pneumonia. Please help me. They thought that taking a bath would make you sick, so King James IV apparently just never took a bath, and his hygiene was so bad that he would sometimes pass on lice to others just by being in the same room as them. Even if he was in a room hours prior, but he would give you lice. Doesn't help that the guy had long hair. Guy's got Steven Tyler hair. It's like a lice lunchroom in here. Lice would emit off of this man. Margaret Tudor was married to King James IV. That must have sucked. So itchy. In our number 8 spot today we have King George V. When was the last time you saw a stamp? I haven't seen a stamp in months, but King George V, but he loved stamps. Maybe a bit too much. It was taking many hours out of his days, even when it shouldn't have been a priority at all. King George V continued to collect stamps during World War I. Everybody is trying to stay alive. George is just licking stamps in the library, adding them to collections. Like all collections, the king started at an early age, but in the end of his days, George had albums and albums and albums. So many stamps. He had around 330 albums, each with 60 pages full of stamps. That's so many stamps. In 1905, George set an all-time stamp record. It was the most money ever spent on a stamp. The man dropped like 220,000 on one stamp. That's some Logan Paul shit. So naturally, he was nicknamed the King of Stamps, or rather, the King of Philately. That's the official term for collecting stamps. Some stamp jargon for ya. There you go. Welcome to Bumblebee. We're learning. Smash that thumbs up.
Number 7. Camorra. Everyone always talks about Italian-American families, but never forget about the motherland. 1, because they are still around to hurl meatballs at you, if you do, and 2, the meatballs they toss to you are the kind you ain't coming back from. The most successful of the Italian mob families, the Camorra has been around since back in the 19th century, just like awkward first dates. In modern times, they pull in around $4.9 billion per year from all kinds of illegal enterprises, from trafficking firearms to extortion. They got their start offering protection services in the 1800s during Italy's violent political struggles, and they've been killing it ever since. It's kind of a bad joke.
Number 6. The Jesse James Gang. The real-life Wild Wild West bank robber, the man, the myth, the literal legend, Jesse James. Every cowboy stereotype fits here. Facial hair? Check. Rough and rugged persona? Check. Robbing and looting with your favorite pair of 6-shooters? Checkerino. That's right, neighbor. No stagecoach was safe, no lady and her baubles were safe. That wasn't until a man named Robert Ford shot Jesse James. However, I'm of the notion that just because you shot Jesse James, that don't make you Jesse James. Hence why I didn't know who Robert Ford was until I made a very savvy Google search. But we've all heard of Jesse James though, haven't we? Strange how that works.
Number 5. The Medellin Cartel. You ever seen Narcos? Okay then, moving on to the next point. I'm just kidding. Pablo Escobar, Colombia. The Medellin cartel was a joint operation between multiple different Colombian traffickers and was in business from 1972 to 1993 in a huge amount of territory. Colombia, Panama, California, New York, Florida, Peru, the Bahamas, Canada. They were moving literal tons of snow each year at the height of the operation, making around $60 million a day. A day. It became political in its later years, and becoming political always ruins pretty much everything, so.
Number 4, Hell's Angels. As a large white dude, there's something that happens to us when we reach middle age. We get bigger, the bellies hang a little lower, hair grows silver and thinner, our skin begins to darken from years of neglect and binge drinking in the sun, while tanning with cigarettes. Yes, that's right, it's time to buy a motorcycle, says the little voice in our heads. What? No, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. This is something said by all Hell's Angels members, or your dad, or your uncle, at one point. Despite being a fun weekend club for dads and uncles to ride bikes and all the good stuff they do, the club sadly has more police investigations than a nefarious motorcycle club that has ulterior motives. Yeah, it's not good. It's not all good stuff. Unaliving, smuggling, well, you get the point here. I'd be here all day listening all the naughty stuff. At least I'm not insecure about my aging though. I wonder how much a Corvette is.
Number 3, the Chicago Outfit. The Chicago Outfit was founded in 1910 by Big Jim Colosimo, but its main first leaders were Johnny Torrio and none other than this one guy, you might have heard of him, Al Capone. When they first cropped up, the South Side Gang was fighting gang wars over distribution of alcohol during the Prohibition, but they've moved on to bigger and better things. You know, cheerful stuff like loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, political corruption, and that kind of wholesome activity. The outfit has been one of the most powerful, violent, and largest unified criminal organizations in the Midwest of the US.
Number 2, Oil Baron. John D. Rockefeller, the richest American, the CEO. The owner of Standard Oil, but more importantly, the first oil baron, and really the first man to own a monopoly on the oil industry. Yeah, that's right, I'm throwing a little corporate crime your way. I was gonna put Adam on the list here as a joke, but he didn't want me to bring up his jail time.
Hey!
Nah, I'm just kidding, he didn't go to jail, but he should be arrested though. For being so gosh darn cute, right? Anyways, all joking aside, John D. Rockefeller's wealth was impressive. Today, with inflation, it would sit somewhere in the hundreds of billions. My god. Yes, the family still has the wealth, and no, sadly, I'm not related. Why I bring him up is because laws were created after this manipulation of the oil industry, and the reasons for is absurd wealth. They were created because of him. That's insane. Dude's got a whole square in New York. I can't even afford a closet at those prices. Oh man, someone adopt me.
Number 1, the Cray twins. Reggie and Ronnie Cray. It's the Cray twins, innit? These identical twin brothers were the heads of crime in the East End of London, England in the 1950s and most of the 1960s. They were intermingled with politicians and entertainers through their nightclubs. People like Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. With friends like that, you're bound to be a celebrity yourself. That doesn't seem helpful though when it comes to being a criminal though, especially when one of you is literally insane. The Cray twins ran the organization known as the Firm, which was involved in crimes like armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, and assault. All the stuff that Andrew does in his spare time. Hey! I am being held against my will. Please call the authorities. Just kidding, he's great, he's great.